Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to another edition of Story World Explorers, where we're exploring, well, not even the story world, but the world of NFTs.
Right, exactly. So we had Transmedia producer Houston Howard, good friend of the podcast and good friend of us.
Well, it's a second time on Story World Explorers.
That is very true. And we were speaking about NFTs, the future of NFTs, and really the possibilities to creators that NFTs hold out. Different kinds of strategies of getting in, and really we did do a lot of diving into fantastic storytelling that you can do with NFTs and everything.
And it's one of those things where it's not a get rich quick scheme.
Right.
It's not going to be something that you're going to be able to make $1 million on your first NFT. It's it's not right now. It's in its infancy. And eventually, once it becomes something more established, you're going to actually have a plan when pursuing NFTs. You're not going to be able to record a fart noise and make $1 million,
Well, and that's a good segue into, the whole idea of transmedia and the planning, and then you having a strategy for your NFT plan, and everybody should be making them, whether they're planning on launching it tomorrow or in a year or so, with a more established audience around a script or a screen or
because ultimately it allows the audience to feel like they have ownership and more investment in the project in
Absolutely.
general.
So it's a fantastic conversation. If there have any curiosity on what's going on with NFTs, this is not about making NFTs. This is about minting NFTs, but this is about actually creating and ways to utilize NFTs.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up. Or if you'd like to listen to it, it's available on all audio platforms. Enjoy the show.
Enjoy.
Well, great. Welcome back to another Story World Explorers. Today we have back on with us Transmedia producer Houston Howard, a man with just an unbelievable wealth of knowledge in the transmedia space, and is very much on the forefront of things that are changing. And today we have a treat for you because we are talking about NFTs, which if you have had any idea or any, connected to the internet somehow, you would know that, NFTs are the hot topic right now. And there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of confusion, and then a lot of, just trying to figure out, in reality, what the hell's going on.
It's one of those things where it's like, don't treat it like a fad, yet also don't think it's a save-all. It's a tool, and you have to get good at using it in order to make leverage.
Sorry, hey baby, we're doing a podcast. No worries.
Well, see,
what happened to the bookcase this time?
Yeah, I know
she didn't come out of the bookcase. She just came out of the shadows.
I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. When you have a 7-year-old, when you have a 7-year-old and you take your phone or your iPad out at there's a proximity sensor that goes off in their head where they just know dad's phone and iPad is now out of range and they have to go retrieve one just to survive the next hour that I told her that we would be doing this. So anyway, this is life for a dad. So apologize about that.
No. Well, she has to make an appearance once each podcast.
Yeah, right. Now it's becoming a tradition.
Yeah, it's just continuity. It's going to happen every single time now. Every single time. We'll have that character connection.
Yeah, right. So you've been speaking a lot about NFTs, so we're interested in hearing your whole perspective on the situation. We won't go into, the actual nuts and bolts of how to create an NFT or any of that other stuff. This is taking it from the standpoint of a story world, something that maybe you started or something that you have that you've already been working on and trying to leverage these tools that we have to their full potential. And when we were talking earlier, we had these two kind of perspectives, right, that we see. We have the backdoor approach where you start to make the NFT and that's the root and the launch of a story world, and then the front door where you have that established audience, and now we're starting to make the NFTs to add value to our existing audience, and then hopefully being able to expand it out to new people and new audiences.
Sure. Yeah. NFTs is just such a fascinating conversation because I have not approached NFTs as a technological expert in any sense at all. I've approached NFTs mainly from an educational perspective myself, just recognizing the opportunity. I know, in the transmedia space, I have been continually preaching the good gospel of transmedia as this tremendous opportunity for creators to leverage this model in this really super unique time in which we live. And part of that is not being romantic to the past and being able to recognize how things shift and how things are shifting and where things are shifting to. And I think it was Wayne Gretzky who said, if you skate to where the puck is, you're going to miss the puck. You always have to skate to where the puck's going to be in that hockey analogy. And I think that's part of that. That mindset is so crucial. And so what's interesting is even in the transmedia space, I feel like 10 years ago people were talking about transmedia in a certain way, and 10 years later they're still talking about transmedia in the same way, because they got stuck on whatever was sort of going on at that time. But I think having a transmedia mindset is understanding how to continually evolve with the market and evolve with technology. Not saying that we leave everything behind, but we just need to add to our Batman belt of tools that we can, use to somehow leverage our way in, leverage our IP into the market. So I've been on a heavy education binge when it comes to NFTs, working on a couple projects of my own that I'm aggressively prepping for NFT. And as such, I think not only has this helped me, but I always like to be able to bring value to the rest of the community by letting other people know what I've learned, because I think there is sort of this barrier to entry that people create because it seems kind of complicated, right? It just seems too technologically savvy, seems clunky, and a lot of that's true. But I think if you could just understand the opportunity in general, that then opens yourself up to collaborations and people that you can pull in to help you, figure out that technological side of it. But yeah, there's 100 different ways we can go with the conversation. But I think the core message here is that wow, what a neat opportunity that creators have in front of them today that isn't necessarily just like leveraged into the big studios or a core group of financiers or the whoever it is. We're just seeing this decentralization and democratization of technology, and man, this is the almost the perfect realization of that. And and it's exciting to see if we can figure it out. Man, like that's what creators, especially an indie creator, what an indie creator can do with it is just pretty incredible.
Yeah, and that's what's I like how you said decentralization, because that's what I was going to say. Because you really and just to harp on transmedia and always being on the edge, is that when you see these things and they're confusing to you, and Jack knows that NFTs were confusing to me for a while. One beer with a good buddy of ours in the tech space. I was like, I don't know why you'd want to own one, but it's overwhelming, the opportunity, right? It's like, oh, I got to move. I want to move right now. I got to move fast. And there is these couple of different strategies, a couple of different ways to go about it, depending on where you're at. And of course, my mind, maybe I am just a little bit more of a traditionalist with this kind of thing, that, I figure that if you're going to try to make an NFT be worth something, you better have an audience that's going to be like, oh, I can't wait to see this. But we're seeing more and more evidence, especially right now during this kind of bubble period, where there's not a lot of regulation. We don't really know what's entirely happening. That people are doing things and making these NFTs to then launch stories, right? Just off, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, not Monkey Club, Bored Ape Yacht Club. You have this thing that's now being optioned into other forms of media, right?
Sure.
Where it was just an NFT at the start that took off and people were purchasing it, and now they have that audience. And then you have the opposite side of the spectrum almost completely, where Tarantino goes off and he's making NFTs, some never before seen things in Pulp Fiction as NFTs, where that is a very established audience. There are a lot of people that know about Pulp Fiction and that respect that, and would be extremely interested to own a piece of it, however possible. So let's kind of talk about where you're seeing this whole NFT strategy, and we could kind of take it from both sides and kind of list out some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks. of both those sides, and how us as transmedia or just storytellers that maybe don't know much about transmedia can start to look at it through that lens, because it is such a great opportunity.
Right. And I think that, one of the things too is like it's digital artwork is essentially what it boils down to. It's unique digital artwork that you can own and track the ownership through the blockchain, which is all that, technical mumbo jumbo that not a lot of people understand. And I think if you think of it in terms as an artist, you could then extend the story in different directions. And I think if you, as long as you create with the idea of creating a story with value, I think that's probably always going to be the better way, no matter if you do the back door or the front door approach, as long as it has a meaning behind it, and it's not, what YouTube was in the beginning, or what or what the internet was in the beginning, where it was just like, oh, this is new, everybody wants it, so let's make it, and I think you were talking about how there is going to be that next step, that Gen 2 of NFTs, which is actually when it becomes something established that most schmoes know about.
Sure. I mean, it's so interesting because the conversation that's going around the NFT space right now is, or not just the NFT space, but just, in culture, is, what's the big deal? Like, why would someone pay so much money for just a digital thing that's not really real? And it's funny because people tag it as a fad and things like this. These same conversations have happened over and over again. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school and the internet was going to be a thing, and hearing the teachers in my school talk about how the internet was just going to be a fad, and how it was silly for anyone to think they needed their own website. I remember when cell phones were hitting the market, and I remember the conversation that people were having of like, why would you ever want to have a cell phone in your pocket all the time? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Why would you want to give people the opportunity to call you whenever they want? It's just like, and they were confused. So, we've seen this iteration of conversation over and over and over again. But what's interesting about NFTs is when people say, why would you just want to own a digital picture? The ownership of digital goods, it has been a thing for a while. I mean, anybody that's gone through the transition of I used to prize my CD collection way back in the day, right? Like, remember we got like the stands that had like, all 900 of your CDs, like, so everyone that came over to your house could see it. Like, I was that guy. I displayed all my DVDs, I displayed all my CDs, and I ordered them in really specific ways. But eventually you shift over into digital music and streaming music, and why own the physical when you already own the digital? And so most people have already come to terms with digital ownership in that regard, and now this is just sort of a next step. Instead of owning music, now you own you own a piece of art, or you own a video. And so my little girl, when she plays video games, she's buying digital assets all the time. She'll say, Daddy, can you get me this thing for $2.99? I say, what is it? She says, well, it's new wallpaper for this this house that I'm building in this game, and there's no actual wallpaper there at all, and she just purchased a digital asset to live within this sort of metaverse ecosystem that she has in that game. And what we're talking about NFTs is just the exact same thing. It's a reflection that more and more we value digital assets as much, or sometimes even more, than physical assets, and that's just been a shift in culture. But it's not new. It's the same. It's the same conversation, just in a different form. I think this is actually better, because when I say I own digital music, really, when my subscription to Apple Music doesn't give me ownership of anything. I rent my music from the ghost of Steve Jobs, and every time, as long as I pay him $9.99 a month, then I get to continue to rent my music, which is no ownership at all. NFTs are so much better than that, because that's as if now I do own the music, and then as the music becomes more valuable, I actually benefit from that, right? So it's even a better version of that. So yeah, I mean, when we're talking about it, we're talking about just a piece of art, a piece of digital art, or a digital asset of some sense that's connected to a direct agreement people call a smart contract, and it's recorded in a public ledger called the blockchain. And so that everybody could see see who owns it and track chain of title and things like that. So what has been really interesting for me to see is I started probably 4 or 5 years ago in a project that was leaning into NFTs, and admittedly I had that same conversation of like, okay, wait a minute, what is this, and why like people are paying money? And there was my first project that I came across was something called Crypto Kitties, and it was just digital pictures of kitties. And what was interesting, they're NFT stands for non-fungible tokens. So they're one of a kind. So non-fungible means. And so there were thousands of these different versions of these kitty cats that people were paying real money for in the blockchain. And it was fascinating. But now, as I see what people are doing, leveraging this in a big way in the marketplace, there's a lot of stupid money being thrown at it, but the opportunity, I think, is really, really attractive. And I like you mentioned, I like to kind of frame it in my mind. There's 2 different ways to flow it. You either establish your audience somewhere else, whether it's through a movie or a book or a game or whoever or whatever, and then all of a sudden you can then offer NFTs as promotional material, collectible material. You can basically to help just feed the fan base in a good way that you already have, which is great. The other end of that, say the back door into the house, as you mentioned, is when content creators and artists create the art first with no community and use the artwork as the mechanism that builds the community. And a lot of times that requires you to maybe sell or even gift those NFTs for very little money or for free. But you build the community there, and you say you get a few thousand people that love your project, then you can use the pre-awareness of that of your community and leverage it into film and television and things like that. That is the coolest thing to see. As you mentioned, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. There's several of these, CryptoPunks, and there's several of these projects that have been picked up by CAA and UTA and all the big agencies because they see the value of the pre-awareness that they've created in the marketplace. And as we've talked before, that is the deciding factor or the main deciding factor in what gets made and what doesn't, where the investment flows and where it doesn't. Is their community established? And if you can get 1 million people that loves your token and loves your NFT, all of a sudden the studio looks at that and says, okay, if we make a Bored Ape Yacht Club cartoon, there's going to be 1 million people that will tune in and check it out. Whether they actually will, we don't know, but that's sort of the justification, the rationalization of how to do it. And so it's really interesting to see both of those styles at play, and not everything's working, but it's neat to see those 2 ways forward for content creators to utilize.
Yeah, and you laid out a whole bunch of great stuff there, because it has that, when we talk about transmedia, we really are talking about somehow evaluating and then showing the awareness that we have, right? And
Sure.
and leveraging that into new content and everything. So it's almost like, regardless of whether or not you're like, okay, well, I'm going to start my own Bored Ape Yacht Club thing, and it's going to be, I don't know, whatever, coming at it, depending on what you kind of have at your fingertips and the opportunity that you have, both ways can work. And we really have to look at these NFTs as, once again, the exact same thing that we look at how all content is that audience and awareness building, you know. And now I don't know if the Bored Ape Yacht Club people that created those were ever considering, and it was their master stroke to get a cartoon or a series or whatever that they were are getting interest in becoming. If they did, well, that's a great case study right there, right?
Sure.
But a lot of times, there is still that level of planning that goes that gets involved with this before making an NFT and minting one and creating that artwork and everything. So it's extremely interesting, because it's just go back to that idea of decentralization, right? This is taking away a lot of, well, it's establishing a lot of new revenue streams, but it's
Sure.
also giving more power to us as creators to do that work. Get
Absolutely
that
right.
audience awareness, get that, start to build that audience
And it
before
also
doing
allows,
anything.
it also allows the audience to feel like they're a part of it in a different way. Like they
Sure.
own a piece of this world, they own a piece of this art, and of everything that it can become.
Right.
They
Yeah.
are invested on a different level because they have something that maybe isn't super important that it becomes something they could sell for $1 million later in their life.
But it could.
But
Yeah.
it could.
Good.
But maybe.
Good.
But it's like, like it's the same thing. Like what we have, like we get those checks from Disney saying like, you guys own this part of Disney, and the joke is like, oh yeah, we all collectively, all 5 of us own one of the beach chairs,
Right.
At Disney World,
Sure.
But but this is actually something real that you actually own. And
Right.
that-
It's
that-
like actually owning that beach chair.
yeah, it's like actually owning that beach chair.
Or at least a digital version of the beach chair.
Right,
Putting in
exactly.
the metaverse house. But yeah, it's interesting because as a fan of something like Star Wars, big Star Wars fan, and there's an emotional investment I've made into my Star Wars fandom. But if I own an NFT in the Star Wars world, there now is a literal financial fiduciary investment that I've made in the IP. Now, that benefits me as a fan, because what we've seen with NFT communities become very tight knit, and if done right, the NFT communities I think are even more rabid than in a good way, than and fanatical than just like a typical fandom. It's like Star Wars, they're the Star Wars fandom is notoriously terrible because they always just complain about things, and they're not really and they like to snipe at each other in a lot of different ways. Like, oh, you like The Last Jedi, you're a terrible person for liking The Last Jedi. Or you love The Last Jedi, or whatever it is. There's right now the Book of Boba Fett is dividing a lot of the Star Wars communities. There's very divisive people. But what's interesting on the NFT side, when you see these communities being formed, they're very much like, we're all in this together. Let's work together to move this thing forward, because now that we're all literally invested in this thing together, we only benefit by working together to make sure we improve, the project in some cool way. These communities that are being formed are called DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations, right? But they're basically these blockchain NFT fan communities, and they have a lot of sway over, what the future of what the NFT is. With the Bored Ape Yacht Club, what's super interesting about the decision making behind the Bored Ape Yacht Club is through the NFT and the smart contract that goes with the NFT, they granted the NFT holder or the owners and the token holders the ability and the right to go and create secondary licenses off the off their tokens. Right. And so without you don't have to get permission from, if you own the NFT, you have the ability to go do whatever you want with it. And so now, if I own a Bored Ape, I could take that to CAA myself and pitch a TV show or whatever. But if you own a Bored Ape, you could go do something completely different, and we actually don't have to coordinate. What's super interesting about this, though, is even though everybody can do everything separately, however they want, they understand the necessity and the benefit of working together in concert to make sure that it grows organically. And so the owners of the token holders of Bored Ape Yacht Club, they have created something called the writers' room, where now they're saying, okay, guys, let's vote and talk and discuss on what are the opportunities that we actually want to create, and which ones will be included and things like that, because they see it's not just grouchy Star Wars fans sitting back on their barcode lounger, just complaining and giving their opinion. Now there's a benefit to all of us working
Right.
this thing, for good. Be it like literally financially, there's a benefit if this thing works well. And one of my concerns is when people launch NFTs sort of through the back door and create the pre-awareness to then move into film and television. My concern is even though you have that pre-awareness, that when you go to move into film and television or books or games or whatever, that the concept doesn't work the right way, or the story world doesn't lend itself to these opportunities, because from the inception you're not building the entertainment concept properly. That I think will be a thing once we see. Yeah, if you guys remember, I don't know if you remember the caveman from the Geico commercials.
Yes.
Right? Like massive pre-awareness and everybody's super excited. Let's make a caveman sitcom, and that did not work at all. It was terrible, and because I won't go down the rabbit hole of why I think that. I don't think the concept was built for that. It was built for 30-second spots, and then when you try to move it into film and television, it kind of broke down a little bit, even though there was massive pre-awareness. And so I think we're going to see that more and more as we go down that road of like some will hit and some won't, and then there will be this realization of like, oh, wait a minute, like I need Frank and Jack to come help me put this together in the right way, because not everything's going to work. That being said, it's cool that that we're seeing the early stages of a viable path forward for creators, especially if you can start to pair that with a community that you've built outside.
What's amazing is that, and once again, that's why we do these live. We do it live. We have these conversations because then for us especially, we start to piece together some of these things. And one of the core principles of just transmedia in general is getting that audience engaged and feel like they own something. Now here we are, we can actually own something. And like you said, with this community of for the Bored Ape Yacht Club, or once again, there's the danger of it not being right for that, but even just the idea of saying, let's explore what other possibilities we have, because you become a stakeholder. Here I am, I bought this thing at $8.99, and now it's worth $30,000 or whatever, right? Sure. And I have a vocal say, because I have a vested interest. This isn't just and my motivations might be financial. They're probably mostly financial, but there's also some love behind it. The reason why I bought it in the first place. And so then you have this community of people that are highly motivated for the best interests of the NFT, but hopefully invested into a story world of people going like, I can't wait until, have we thought about doing, a mobile game for this, because I think this idea would be amazing. And to have everybody on the same page of going, that does create value. What are these next things that we can invest ourselves in to create that value? And that's so amazing. And I'm even rethinking some of the stuff in our own story world that we're getting ready to launch.
Yeah, sure.
Soon.
How that feels.
Angry man yells at cloud. And so how to repurpose some of that stuff, because you want to have that level of commitment, and you want to be able to eventually at some point as this commoditizes itself, to find the best people to have those NFTs too, right?
Sure.
Of like like this, we're offering it to this select group of people because we know that they're a part of this other, that they're really vested in this. They should have the opportunity first, right of first refusal, if you will. And there was something else, and I can't remember what it was, because you started going down with the negative sides, or the stuff that you're cautious about. And it reminded me a lot of the Calm app, right? I think that was one of the first conversations we had with you, where all of a sudden they want to option that for a series, and we're like, what the fuck is that going to be, right? And they're like, and they don't even know, right? Because they're just looking at pre-awareness. They're like, everybody has this app. This would be a great idea to make a series on it. And that's a dangerous thing. So,
awareness for awareness sake does not mean it works. You can't shoehorn everything that has great pre-market awareness into. And the perfect example is the caveman show that didn't work. Because while it works as a
then a great one though is Ted Lasso. which totally lent itself, right? Because the Ted Lasso thing was an ESPN commercial type thing. It was based off of a spoof. And it works, and it lended itself, and now there's a huge Ted Lasso audience out there that it totally worked for. So long way to say, it's an extremely, it's such a great opportunity. And I think that taking it from the standpoint of like a storyteller, somebody who, might already have a concept for a script, but nobody knows about it. It's very hush hush, very underneath like they've had at a couple of festivals. To consider this idea of NFTs and finding a way to integrate that and find out, if it's possible to do, almost like a raise, because using it as a form of investment, but then also knowing the inherent value of an NFT is that trackable residual income and that it is an investment, and I think I did not know that before talking to you about this, was that that idea that I bought this for $8 and now if I sell it, I'm going to get residual income for it, not just off the actual price, which is absolutely crazy.
Which is awesome for these independent artists, because typically when you sell things on the secondary market, the original artist or the original creator doesn't benefit from that at all. And so if I sell you my book, and then you give me $25, and then you go and put my book up on eBay and sell it to somebody else for $25, you get that $25, but then I don't participate in that revenue that you've gotten from that secondary sale of my asset, right? And so that's the way these things work, right? But with NFTs, because it's tracked through the blockchain and they have these the smart contracts that go along with them. You can then I sell you the NFT for say $25, and then you go and sell the NFT to somebody else for $25. I now participate with a royalty that goes directly to me. That's just administrative instantly through the blockchain. And it's not like I have to wait for you to send me a check. Like it just happens, right? Because this is the cool thing about the technological landscape in which we live. And so all of a sudden, there was a project called The Currency, and it was an NFT project, and the guy minted 10,000 NFTs, and the initial sale of the 10,000 NFTs yielded $2,000. So if you do that math, basically they all sold for about 20 cents a piece, right? Which he probably, unless he did the art himself, he probably ended up losing money, because you have to, think about it, you have to pay somebody if you can't do it yourself, you have to pay somebody to come up with 10,000 unique pieces of art. That's a lot of art. And so right now, what an opportunity for digital artists to open up their services on things like Fiverr or whatever, to say, hey, I can create 10,000 pieces of unique art for your NFT project, for $5,000-$6,000, and you're starting to see that in a neat way. Like in the gold rush, there are people that made lots of money finding the gold, but there's also people that made a lot of money by selling those people picks and shovels. And so there's this like a secondary cottage industry that kind of pops up around these things. And so just as a digital artist, even if you never buy an NFT yourself or mint an NFT, offering your services or collaborating in NFT communities, I think is such a neat thing, because artists typically are the starving artists that you have to kind of scrape by. But now, man, they're really in style. But so this guy did minted 10,000 tokens, sold them for collectively like $2,000, right? But through the royalty participation on the secondary market, through secondary transactions and tertiary transactions, and people just kept trading them and selling them and trading them and selling them. He got $20 million worth of royalties, not just from the initial thing, just from all the different transactions. So somebody's selling it for $5, somebody's selling theirs for $10, somebody's selling theirs for $7. You do that 7,000 times over, or 70,000 times over, all those royalties add up to $20 million, which is incredible, right? And so so there's but the initial sell, the initial minting and release, in the traditional mindset, you would say, oh, this guy, that was a failure, right? Like,
Right.
you invested this money, did 10,000, only got $2,000. Like, that's not a good thing. But when you don't have a community, and you launch an NFT to build the community, your mindset has to not be in short-term economics. It has to be in a long-term benefit. And if you're playing the long game, and you understand, I'm not going to make money in the next 30 to 60 days. It's all about what happens over the next 8 months or 9 months or 3 years. Then all of a sudden, those secondary market transactions can really benefit as you build your community from the ground up. I think that's where people are getting stuck right now, as they go in and say, I want to mint an NFT, and as soon as I mint the NFT, I'm going to be a millionaire, because there's been a lot of dumb money being thrown at them, thrown at stuff. But now that's starting to level off a little bit. So now, if you do have an established community, right? So if you have a podcast that has 10,000 people that love the podcast, right? And then you say, okay, we're going to launch an NFT, and there's going to be, we're going to mint 10,000 NFTs. We want every single person that listens to the podcast to jump in and purchase one of these things. And we're going to offer them as $100 a piece or whatever. Like, you may actually now get 10,000 people buying $100 NFT because they love your podcast, right? And they're already part of your community. And so if you already establish your community outside the NFT, you can operate to some extent in a short-term economic mindset, because you have a community to monetize. But if you're going the back door to where there is no established community, I think you have to have more of a long-term mindset. But man, that secondary market transaction, I think, is like the biggest financial opportunity for these creators. But here's the cool thing: even in these smart contracts, and I think the smart contract is like the sneaky superstar of the whole package here, right? He's not your starting quarterback. He's like the slot receiver that just gets you 130 yards when you need it the most, right? He's not going to be the guy that's leading Sports Center, but man, becomes super valuable as you go. The smart contracts not only can administrate royalties, things like that, but they can also do things where they connect the token holder to real life stuff. So you can have an NFT. Someone buys your NFT, and you have an event or a conference or a fan event, like the Star Wars. They do like the May the 4th be with you Star Wars celebration thing. Your NFT can get you access into these events based on the smart contract, right? So in your smart contract, you can say your NFT is a ticket to admission to this, that, and the other. The smart contract can also stipulate that you could even trade a NFT in for a physical collectible, which is something interesting. There's a few artists that have been doing this where they'll sell an NFT, and then which is a piece of digital art, and then they'll say, if you want to what they call burn the NFT, we'll send you the actual physical art of this exact same NFT, and now you can decide, do you want the physical or do you want to keep the digital? And because if you burn the digital, it creates more scarcity, which then drives up the value of the rest. Right. So sometimes burning these things is good for the creator, because it can just increase value, and the person gets sort of a physical asset they can put on their wall, or not. You can hold it and not get, or if you don't redeem it, then they actually burn the physical copy as well. And so there's a lot of weird, like, interesting mechanics that are going on. But don't think that an NFT only connects you to digital assets. It's a digital asset that can also connect you into real world stuff if the creator has the mindset of understanding how to operate in both. There's a lot of interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because we could talk a quick bit about the different ways that NFTs work, because we've seen a lot of stuff with cats. What was it called? It was Ashton Kutcher did something. It was about like weed smoking cats or something like that. Oh, dopey cats or something like that. And the NFTs were tickets to see the series. You could not see the series unless you bought an NFT.
Sure.
But there, like you said, and I didn't know about the whole burn the digital asset, but that's another thing too, where you have this, and now all of a sudden I'm thinking about our stuff again, but you have this digital asset, this NFT that then you could say, you know what, I'd rather have the painting.
Sure.
Or I'd rather have, whatever else. Maybe it's like if it was a coin, it's an actual coin,
Yeah. Sure.
And then you can, once again, it's all about burning, and then you create that scarcity, or then it values everything. And NFTs can be used in a whole bunch of different ways, and not just in and that's really the reason why, I think that NFTs, the metaverse, all this stuff goes into transmedia and not necessarily the other way around, because if you have that far out plan, and you're planning on how you're going to use these different tools, right? How you're going to leverage a release of a limited NFT for this specific series, or something like that. How you're going to not just use it as a means to get to the series, but then continue to expand on it, right?
100%.
Continue to get their new the audience investment.
And there's another thing too, and I was thinking about this when you were mentioning the Star Wars NFTs, and I was thinking there is when you watch a series, maybe you could, and you're watching the movie or the series, and maybe they do a release of NFTs beforehand, and then you can see that NFT in the series, and you can be like, oh, that painting in Boba Fett's house, which clearly means I don't watch Star Wars. Right. I own that. I own that NFT.
Yeah, sure.
That is mine. I own that. Now the whole world sees it, and I own it. And that's kind of a cool way, because now it's not just, it's the digital representation of something in a fantasy world. So it's something that doesn't even exist in the physical world, but in the digital world it does exist, and I own it in that fantasy world just as much as I own it in this world, or parallel universe, however you want to think about it. But that's kind of a cool thing to think about that I don't think you could have done prior to this technology.
You couldn't have. And the fact that that would then appear in Boba Fett's house, what that does is it makes that NFT more valuable, and then then that benefits me, right? And so then I'm super invested in to say, hey, everybody, watch this episode of the new Boba Fett show, because my NFT is going to be in there, which then benefits Lucasfilm because I'm out there spreading brand awareness for the new episode, and it just continues to feed itself in a really interesting way, right? And I think from a transmedia perspective, even if one thing that becomes, when we're talking about transmedia, we're talking about how do we incentivize the migration of the audience, and how do you get people to say, man, I have to go get that Luke Skywalker NFT. I have to go get that Boba Fett NFT. I think when they start getting into not just promotion or not just collectibles, but actually extending the story of a character into the NFTs, all of a sudden that becomes a really interesting play, because it creates the incentive for people to want to do it. So if I'm a big Mandalorian fan, and they release the Baby Yoda NFT, the Grogu NFT, and not only do you get the Grogu digital art NFT, but somehow with that, you get new and unique information about Grogu you can't find anywhere else other than that NFT. All of a sudden now, not only have you incentivized people by having a financial interest in the IP, but you've narratively incentivized them to want to go navigate to these NFTs, which I think is as everything gets commoditized and more NFTs are launched, you have to find more tactical ways to get people to want to choose your NFTs over the other 39 million NFTs that are kind of swirling around. So if you have an established community that loves your story, incentivize them with the story, which is the same transmedia principle we've been talking about in the transmedia circles for years and years and years. But now we're just kind of porting it in a different format, but still using that same, the reason I would go from the He-Man, the He-Man comic books to the He-Man cartoons when I was a kid, because it was a continuation of that story. That same principle now can work whether you're going from a podcast to an NFT or a TV show to an NFT. Just figure out how to connect it narratively. I think there's a bigger opportunity. But I think with you guys, for example, like something that's kind of interesting, with fashion is one, having NFTs of every single piece of clothing and fashion you could, within a project, and having that right there, but also the NFT through the smart contract. If you offer people a 3D version of digital art of the fashion that they can then wear inside the metaverse, when we're all in the metaverse, like when we go in the metaverse, now not only do I own like the cool art where somebody's wearing this piece of, these pants or this jumpsuit or whatever, it's cool art, cool NFT, but I also, through the smart contract, get the digital version of the clothes that I can now wear when I go to the metaverse nightclub. Like now, all of it, and nobody else has these pants but me.
Right.
Yeah. Like that, especially, based on who designs it and things like that, that becomes like a big deal. I think metaverse fashion is going to be huge. And I think anybody that is operating in that world can pair NFT and digital assets in a really interesting way to now kind of link them, because metaverse and NFT are still kind of separate concepts, but thinking of how to now merge them together in that. Yeah, they're going to collide. I think that's a neat thing. So a lot of cool things that you could do with this stuff for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, and that's definitely part of and it's just all future thinking, guys. People listening, it's all just like how and what's going on now, and what's your wildest dream? I mean, you're talking about the NFT and the metaverse; they're kind of separate still. See, in my mind, they're already together, right? Like this is already moving that way.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had
and
what's
interesting about this is when we're talking about the metaverse and all this, is you just see the shift in culture where we're more we're prizing the digital over the physical. One, because the physical world kind of sucks right now. One, we've been stuck inside for so long, but the world's on fire in 1,000 different ways. It's kind of a bummer. And so people are using the digital world as escapism. What's super interesting when, the new Matrix movie was released. One, they had a really cool NFT release with the Matrix film, where the new Matrix film, where they released all these NFTs, and then you could choose the red pill or the blue pill, and based on which ones you choose, like your NFT would look like, what they would look like inside the Matrix, or if you chose the other pill, what they would look like outside the Matrix in Zion. And so you had an interesting option to kind of craft the way it looked based on the red pill, blue pill thing as part of the Matrix. But what's interesting about the Matrix is what made this new Matrix so different, feel different than the original Matrix, is when the original Matrix launched 20 years ago, the thought of being trapped in a digital environment and not knowing the difference between digital and physical was horrifying and concerning. And like the Matrix is a bad thing. You talk to kids today, and when I mean kids, like 18-year-olds, they're like, wait a minute, like, so there's the Matrix is like this digital world that you can just like exist in and do like it, just like hang out, and you don't have to worry about anything. Like that sounds awesome. And so now so what that does is it makes the Matrix hit different today, because it's not scary anymore, and it's not troubling anymore. It's kind of cool, right? And so I think that's part that kind of impacted the new Matrix movie in a way that maybe they didn't expect. But I think that's reflective of the shift in culture, which is making things like the metaverse and NFTs become highly prized. And people understand, like, my set of clothes in the metaverse is going to be more important than my clothes in real life, because I'm going to be meeting more important people and different people and my in the metaverse. Now we can talk about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but just like with transmedia, when we talk about the shift into different technologies, we can talk about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the fact of the matter, it is what it is. Like it's the shift, and you can either adapt and take advantage of the opportunity, or you can be romantic and complain about the good old days, and then have be left behind. But I think it's the valuing of digital of our digital lives is a thing. And I have to think about, like, as a dad, I have a 7-year-old, I have a 11-month-old, and I think about that, like, what's it going to be when they're 20, 25, 30? Are their digital lives going to be more important than their physical lives? And the answer is probably. right? Like, and so do I, how do I teach them to, use, to approach it responsibly and ethically, but, I don't want to kind of put them in a bubble to where they don't lean into it, because that's now going to be the opportunity. And, you have to lean into it. But I think with creators, man, like the ability to just experiment. Yep. And just like, one, do a little bit of education. Right now, what's cool is you go to Google and you search what's an NFT. You're going to find 8 million articles about it and like 3,000 YouTube videos. Like, all the education's there. We can educate ourselves to a certain point, but just try it out. Like I said, I'm part of 2 projects right now. We're aggressively prepping for NFT. One I'm internally developing. It's a huge project. And we are right now, the way we're in the world building process. And the way we world build is before we develop individual characters, we develop character groups that exist in the world. And right now, we're about a third of the way done, and we have about 45 character groups that we've developed for this world. And the way we're looking at it right now is, okay, if we just took these 45 character groups, if we designed 10 individual characters that exist in all 45 of these character groups, that would allow us, 450 unique pieces of art that we could then launch as NFT, right? Individual, or maybe there's 100 that we want to do per thing, and there's even more, right? And and all of a sudden that maybe becomes an interesting opportunity. Now, you say, well, why would I want to buy an NFT of a project that I'm not familiar with, or I don't know? Well, that one, do you like the idea? Do you want to be part of the community? And 2, like, there's an interesting thing here. If think about it, think about it with sports cards, baseball cards and football cards, basketball cards, right? Like, if you could have went and bought the Michael Jordan rookie card, right? Whenever, back in the 80s, whenever he came out, like, why do I want a sports card? The cards are dumb. Well, like, you at the time they're dumb, but like when Michael Jordan becomes the greatest of all time, it's not dumb at all to have that, right? Yeah. And so if I would have, if this was around in 77, and George Lucas would have released his like personal sketch of R2D2 and released it as sort of a digital thing and say, hey, this is a new project I'm working on. And here's a robot that's going to be in the store, right? And I'll sell it to you for $2, right? Like most people's like, wow, you're wasting $2. Why would you do it? Like, that's worthless, right? Well, it probably, but if I would have gotten that for $2, now George Lucas's original sketch of R2D2 would be massively valuable. Yeah. And so all of a sudden now, like, there's an interesting movement of like, hey, let me just go like get 4 or 5 or 10 or 50 of these NFTs from all these burgeoning IP, and then in success, one of them becomes Star Wars or Harry Potter or The Matrix. This thing that I got for $2 is now worth $200,000. 10, 20 years later. That's cool. And I'm part of the club. I'm part of the community, right? Which is a big deal too. So,
yeah. So, the hour just absolutely flew by. I mean, I think there is a lot of great information there, about NFTs. It is one of those things that you're hearing so much about, and so obviously we want to bring in somebody, a steward of the entire storytelling universe, Houston, here to talk a little bit more about that.
And just think, guys, if you were, we could go back in time and get the Joe Burrow NFT. If you got a Joe Burrow NFT, like when he left Ohio State to go to LSU before he became a superstar, and you could have got the Joe Burrow NFT. Man, like, now leading my Cincinnati Bengals into the Super Bowl, the most dramatic turnaround of any franchise in NFL history, the quickest turnaround. Like, wow, how and if he wins the Super Bowl, man, like, that NFT becomes super valuable.
If the Bengals are listening, having him with a cigar in his hand,
right? That's what I'm saying.
That's an NFT.
And the smart contract could actually be redeemed for a case of Joe Burrow cigars with who they are. There's lots of different opportunities for this.
Absolutely.
And maybe if Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, would launch NFTs around his players, maybe we could build an indoor practice facility, because we are the northernmost team that doesn't have an indoor practice facility because Mike Brown is notoriously cheap. Maybe he just needs to hear your podcast about NFTs.
Yeah, there you go.
To wisen up, but go
right.
Bengals.
Well, if he reaches out, we're directing him right to you,
Yeah,
because
right.
there's nobody that's going to be able to service him better than a Cincinnati Bengals fanatic fan as much as you.
We have our dysfunctional owners too, so
That's true.
the Bears
true.
Definitely we
I don't know if Mike Brown's ever said this line. I am not a football guy, a football evaluator, but the GM will report to me. So I don't know if he's ever said that.
Yeah.
But the sound bites are hilarious.
That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah,
That's tough.
right. Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But Houston, always a pleasure talking to you and having you on podcast. It will happen again, I'm sure.
Sure.
Hopefully soon, once you have those 45,000 NFTs up and live with your own store, because we're interested in talking and diving into the worlds that you're working on.
100%. Let's do it.
And yeah, we'll make sure that happens. But we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Well, that's a fantastic conversation with Houston. Love talking to him.
Yeah.
He was in an especially good mood because his Cincinnati Bengals made it to the Super Bowl.
Made the Super Bowl.
And so
They're
obviously
playing this Sunday, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. So if you want to listen to some more great stuff on Transmedia that Houston said, you can watch Story World Explorers number 4, which is right here next to me, and explore some new story worlds. And hell, come up with some interesting NFT ideas for them too. The NFT consultant is coming. You could be the first one.